I just think Park Oceani is one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Why do we need peer-to-peer decentralized communication?
I can start, and then Andrew can tell me why my answer is completely wrong or completely right. I think it's an obvious question. We need no strings attached, fully scalable, everybody can get on them, no person controlling anything, communication systems. We're doing a podcast right now. It's not like there's somebody in the middle translating what you're saying to me so they can filter out things or making sure that it's right or reducing the quality or whatever. Because it's just communication between peers. That's how all things should be. And the only way you can actually do this in the world we live in, or in any world, is through peer-to-peer, because it's the only way you can take out the middleman and you can cut out the incentive needed by a middleman to milk people doing the communications for all kinds of things, to monetize it immediately, to put in ads, to read your messages so they can make you better ads and all that stuff. Communication should just be what that is, communication. So the question is not why do we need peer-to-peer communication? The question is rather why do we need centralized communication like that? Because that's really silly in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe another thing to add to that would be people who don't know how things like Facebook work technically internally. They might imagine that, oh, I have a social network with 50 or 100 of my friends, and when I send messages, it just goes to their computers. And but then when they learn that this is actually all going to a server somewhere that can act as that middleman and inject all these other things into their communications, they might be surprised and wonder why is something like that needed. So I think in many ways, peer-to-peer is just a much more intuitive. It matches people's intuitions on how they think communication actually works.
Yeah, and also I think, especially in the world we live in today, and we touched upon that in the other podcast a little bit, we need more than ever resilient communication systems that can work in any environment for any people. Like Facebook is big, but not everybody can get on Facebook because you might be in a country that's restricting access. It's not great if you just can flip a switch to restrict access to communications. It's a really good way to control power and restrict people, but it's not good for users. So we need systems also where that's just not a possibility, and peer-to-peer is the only way to do that.
So peer-to-peer is here to bring freedom?
It's here to bring a lot of things. It's here to just put the peers in the center and take away anybody else's agenda and just let people talk about what they want to talk to each other and share movies with each other or share pictures with each other or share text with each other and build all kinds of other things, but without anybody else's censorship or restrictions or ads or whatever, and just bring back to basics. It's like how communication should be, just communication. I think.
Yeah, but also I think when it comes to freedom, it definitely makes things more data centric. In the world of the internet today, you don't really own your own data with any of the services that you use. Yeah. Whereas in a peer-to-peer world, all the data is owned and managed by you. You have the signing keys that controls how it gets updated. And this gives you just a huge amount more flexibility to choose how you want to treat your data, where you want it to live, who you want to give it to, what apps you want to use it in. And this is the level of control that you just don't see in any centralized service, because providing that level of control would just be a huge burden on any developer who builds centralized services. That's why in the world today, you see all these things like API mashups, where if I want to use my data from one app in another app, the developers of both of those apps have to somehow negotiate to figure out how to make that possible. Whereas in a data-centric peer-to-peer world, it's just flexible by default.
But also, like, even what Andrew's saying is so true, and like maybe 10 years ago, there was more movement towards more APIs and systems like that. We've seen in the last 3 months, services like Twitter has basically disabled all their ways to get data out of it, because they're realizing that if they don't do that, people will leave. It's like, East Germany built a bigger wall to keep people in. Very, 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 very good solution if you just want to keep people in. But it's not a very, very good solution for humanity. And like, this is the same way for technology. It's just, and I think we're talking about this now, and if we're talking in 5 years, it's going to be even more relevant. The way I'm sure when they built the Berlin Wall, they didn't realize that that was going to be so consequential. But like, give it 5 years, they were like, oh, we should have left. This is the same thing, in my opinion.
Could you explain how it works as if we were 5-year-olds?
Well, I think there are maybe two angles to look at it from. We talk about keys and APIs and all this stuff. This is kind of relevant to developers building on top of this stuff that might be really interested in all the technical details of how it works. And there's lots of really interesting stuff there. But when you talk to non-technical people who might not care about that stuff, at the end of the day, it just boils down to a lot better privacy, a lot more resilience, and no arbitrary limitations that might be imposed on you by a middleman.
Yeah.
I think those are the main takeaways.
Yeah. It's like an analogy I like to use is kind of like if you're on Twitter and you're very, very popular on Twitter and you get 1 million followers on Twitter and you're like, I'm a Twitter star. If Twitter just one day decides to go turn off your account, what are you going to do? You can't do anything because you didn't own it. You're actually just helping Twitter. And you think you're helping yourself. You probably were for a while, but you actually didn't own anything. In a peer-to-peer system, that couldn't happen because you're in control. You have all the data. And you can take that analogy and you can translate that to any other application you're doing. And the same thing applies. So it's actually just removing a lot of restrictions from you and removing a lot of ways in which somebody else is applying their monetization strategies on you or control or whatever you want to put it, their agenda on you, and just putting you in the driver's seat. And that's what I like about it, because it's like, it's very natural. It's how it should be, I think.
Let's take Keat, for example. Why open source?
Well, like, and by the way, you should get on the new beta, and then you'll love it even more, because it's very good. It just launched. Was it yesterday? I can't even remember. But yeah, that's very good. We're huge open source fans. Me and Andrew have been developing open source for I don't know, 10 years, something like that, maybe even more, probably more, older than we think. Everything in Keat is ground up. Peer-to-peer technology that's all open source. We have a whole stack at Holepunch. The Holepunch stack is all open source. We have a platform that everything is running on that's open source. That's going to be launching very soon. I'm afraid to say the date now because then the marketing department will hunt me down because I don't know when this is airing, but it's going to be announced very soon. So we're huge fans of open source, and like I think like 95% of the stack is open source, and some of the stuff we're iterating pretty hard and keeping a little bit more under wraps, just for basically limiting the amount of abuse. Like a lot of things that happens in these projects, and this happened to me in the past also, is you'll make something and immediately it'll be cloned and put in like some sort of shitcoin for somebody to monetize it and confuse users, and ends up killing the whole movement in the beginning because users can't navigate this crazy explosion of scam apps and stuff like that, and happened to many projects. There's many things around that. So we're thinking about our users a lot, and we want to we want to give them a simple experience in a really good product. So that's why we're a little bit more restrictive on that and thinking a lot about that. So it's a very, very easy user experience to begin with. But you should definitely check out the Holepunch stack, and if you're a developer, and you can build all these kind of apps yourself. Also, it's very, very exciting technology, I think.
Yeah. And also to reiterate, if you go to the GitHub repo for Holepunch, you can see all the core networking and cryptography modules that we use for everything super important inside of the stack today, inside of Keat today. It's all open source right now.
What are the main challenges in working this way?
It's super challenging. We talked a little bit about this in the other podcast also, but I think it just made me think about it this more. Even like our job, especially Andrew's job also, because Andrew is working with a lot of really, really hard, interesting problems, is to make really complicated technology that solves really complicated problems that are all head scratchers, keeps you up at night, unforgiving. You work all the time to solve these really hard problems, and then all you have to do is hide it from users, so they never need to know. The users just want to see a chat message and a list of chat messages, and then when they scroll them, they want to load the messages, and when they add a user, they want to add the user. And how that works, it's not important. Super important for us, because that's where the privacy comes in and all the things we talked about. From the users, it's not. As long as they get an experience that's similar or better to what you described on Facebook, but with all the aspects we just talked about, that's super important. The no restrictions, no limits, all that stuff. The technology doesn't matter for them, and that's what our job is. So it's actually very unforgiving, and it's kind of like the silent man in the background that's just building this entire stack. But I think that's.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you use, you often forget just how much work a server in a centralized service has to do, and it does a lot of the job for you. Whereas when you don't have that, a whole bunch of new challenges are introduced. So there's that element. But also, I think from a developer's perspective, there's many ways in which developing peer-to-peer is kind of how you, a line that I like is it's how you thought computers worked before you knew about computers.
Yeah.
So there are many ways in which doing a lot of peer-to-peer development just feels like, oh, this is kind of the way I imagined everything would be when I was really young and before I knew anything about computers. And so it's kind of refreshing too at the same time, but also really hard.
What are the perks in working this way?
Oh, that's all nothing but perks, honestly. It's kind of like, why would you not have, just from my point of view, personal point of view, why would you not have a job that challenges you every day? And especially when the outcome of that job is to make technology better in a fundamentally good way for humanity, I think. Not just us, but anybody working in this space, because this is the most important space of our lifetime, by far, in my opinion. You should work on that. You should work on these hard problems. Nobody else is. And if Facebook is working on it, it's just a way for them to squeeze more money out of it somehow. So that's why we do it. That's why we've always been doing this, basically, because it's so important. That's why everybody who works at Hole Punch are very committed to working on this stuff also, and very excited to work on this stuff also, because it's so important. And it's also a space that's gone through a huge transformation in the last 10 years from being more of a hobby space for a lot of people, making BitTorrent apps in the weekend that did some stuff, to becoming a thing that's like trying to revolutionize communication, which is probably the most used app for any person. Everybody uses communication. That's such a huge leap, and that's why it's so exciting and so challenging also, but in a very, very good way. So yeah, it's the best.
I think there's a real element of getting addicted to it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are drawn to it for reasons that are kind of hard to explain. Like, obviously there's all the great stuff that we talked about, but there's also this kind of aesthetic quality where just like, when you're building a peer-to-peer app and you just know that when it's just running between these people right in front of you, there's something that feels really nice about that. And it just feels very, it's just very satisfying to do. And so I think there's an element where people just get hooked as soon as they start.
There's all these small things that you don't realize. In the beginning, you always got asked a lot like, so how many users are we? And we're like, we don't know. Because it's a private peer-to-peer communication app, we can track how many people go and download the binary once in a while, there's a counter. But how people use it, we don't know, and we shouldn't know, and we can't know, because that's what the app does. What are people sharing in the app? We don't know. That's sometimes challenging when you have a bug or something because you're like, we don't know anything. And one of the things I love about Keat is when you go to the mobile app, and it has this section, because Apple forces you to put in the things you're tracking, and Keat just says nothing, because it can't and it shouldn't, and it's peer-to-peer and it's private. That's so exciting to me, because that's how, as an engineer, you see an actual perfect system in a way operating. That's really cool.
But it also requires, I think, a real shift, a real shift in thinking when you come from kind of the standard world of development to the peer-to-peer world, because the kinds of problems you have to solve are just completely different. And so it really takes adjusting to. I think also there's a learning curve, but it's a fun one.
Also, we're hiring, so anybody wants to work on this, you should definitely join the team. We can always use more.
Do you think that something like Keat could inspire new peer-to-peer communications?
Oh yeah, I think peer-to-peer in general is one of the most inspiring things, because it gives. Obviously, we're both developers who have developer backgrounds, so we often think in these ways. But it gives you this feeling like being in control and all this stuff can sound a little soft, but it's like this feeling of you're just in your home, you're making an app. That app can have impact on billions of people worldwide, because you don't need to set up infrastructure and put in tons of money to scale it. You just distribute the app, get other people to install it, and it kind of works. That level of power that gives you, and that huge hit of dopamine you get from that feeling is insane. It's kind of like, starting a little business and seeing growing and growing and growing, but just you can do that over and over and over again. There's nothing like it, I don't think. And I think that's the true unlock of peer-to-peer technology and communication technology. And I think we'll see, I think this is Andrew's term, or he read it somewhere, but a Cambrian explosion of things in this space here in the future. Probably a lot of it running on Hole Punch technology, because we solve all these problems once and then everybody can build on it. That's definitely the way of the future, in my opinion. Yeah, 100%.
If there is one question you could ask Satoshi, what would it be?
I'm interested why he wrote a white paper and didn't just publish it, because that's a very interesting academic approach. That's very good for the world right now, but it's also an interesting engineering aspect. and also be cool to know who he was.
Also, yeah, just if he could have anticipated the degree of the consequences of this invention, I think that'd be a really interesting thing to know.
Did you have the opportunity to buy something with Bitcoin in Lugano?
Oh yeah, tons. I bought tons of ice cream with Bitcoin here because there's really good ice cream in Lugano. And I'm also amazed about how quickly it goes from being like a novel thing to something that's just like as easy as swiping your credit card. That's like actually the thing that I think, after all the things we talked about, has made me the most hopeful for the future, because it becomes very normal really fast.
Ice cream, coffees, many.
You can buy a house here with Bitcoin at the real estate agents. I know. Maybe we'll get there at some point.
What do you like the most about Lugano so far?
You can't see it today, but the weather is generally really nice here. I also like, this is a little bit selfish maybe, but Lugano is definitely becoming the hub for peer-to-peer technology in Europe and probably in the world. And that's super exciting for us, obviously.
I just think Parco Chiani is one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's just such an incredible, I go there all the time, and it's amazing.
What do you think about Lugano becoming a Bitcoin adoption hub?
I mean, it makes sense in Switzerland, because Switzerland is known for being super stable, and it's super stable, and it's like a country you can count on, and it's a country that actually always is looking ahead, and you can really feel that, especially with the Bitcoin and peer-to-peer. And I think if any country was going to bet on something like Bitcoin and peer-to-peer, it's going to be Switzerland, because it's resilient. It's like every Swiss house has a bunker in the basement. It's kind of like the peer-to-peer thinking, just in case, you know. And it's a super nice place to live. Lugano is a especially nice place to live, so it's also a really good place to work on peer-to-peer technology for sure.
Yeah. So. But we're also both new here, so I think I personally am just looking to learn more about how to answer that question over time too.
Of course, yeah.
Definitely. We have been too.
Yeah. Love to hear from the local Luganites if they love all the nerds coming here, but we definitely love it.